Your first year of climbing is your chance to set up a solid foundation and set yourself up for long-term success. With the wrong approach, most climbers quickly hit a wall and don't really understand how to get around it. I know it because it's exactly what happened to me. For years, I thought that getting stronger was the only solution, and going down this path led me to be stuck for years. Multiple injuries, and worst of all, it took away most of my fun in climbing. But when I moved to Japan and started working at BPUMP Tokyo, I made a choice that turned my climbing upside down. And in 1 year, I managed to go from V4 to V8 at one of the hardest gyms in the world. This guide will help you solve most of the problems that you come across in your climbing career, even before they pop up. Many people have been climbing for over 5 years and constantly get stuck on the same issues. But by building a solid foundation, and more importantly, in the right order, you'll know exactly what to worry about on each stage, and you'll never be lost or wondering if you're actually improving. In simply 1 year, you'll be ahead of most climbers and have set a solid foundation to build the rest of your climbing on. I've taught these concepts to dozens of people and transformed their climbing. So as long as you're paying attention, you can leave the rest to me. Month 1. Learn the basics and trust your feet. This is your foundation. Everything you focus on here will shape your future in climbing. In the first month, you're gonna learn a ton of new stuff. But the most important things I want you to focus on is hand position, hip position, and foot placement. Using the right grip for each hold and understanding what angle will lead to the least load on your hands, arms, fingers is going to be key for your climbing. How are you going to do this? Focus on gripping the least you can on every single hold. You'll be surprised at how little force you actually have to put into your hands to stay on. There is one silent killer in climbing, and that is over-gripping. This happens to beginner and advanced climbers alike, so learning how to relax your hands is going to be a crucial step for everything else. Hip positioning. Your hips control your center of gravity. Keeping your hips close to the wall is going to move your weight over your feet instead of pulling on your arms. The fastest way to tire out your arms is not using your hips effectively. If you leave your hips out and away from the wall, the only way for you to move up is by pulling with your arms. But if you can learn to balance your hips over the foothold instead of away from the wall, you'll be doing one-legged squats all the way up, and your arms and fingers are not gonna feel anything. This is the key to climbing. Foot placement. The biggest mistake beginners make is using their feet all over the place and not stepping with intention. You want to use the tip of your foot and always think 2 steps ahead on what you're going to do next. Because if you have to swap your feet on a hold, it's much better if you can preemptively put it on a spot where you don't have to do a tablecloth to swap the feet. Those are the 3 things I want you to focus on the technique side. But on the physical side, there's only one thing I want you to focus on: mobility. Now, it's important to understand that mobility is not passive flexibility or stretching. Mobility is being able to move your body across the whole range of motion for that movement. It is huge because when you're moving on the wall, you are constantly going to be doing side squats and lunges and standing up. And by moving your hips effectively and putting a lot of strength in your hips and lower body, you are essentially making your arms work less. And I want you to understand that this is something every single climber has to work on, not just you. So start working on it fast and you'll see it's worth it. The trick is to add it into your warm-up. That way you will always do it. This is something you'll do your whole climbing life, so ensure it happens every single day. And by doing that, you'll reduce the chance of injury and improve the effectiveness of every technique you learn on afterwards. In climbing, we jam our feet into really small shoes. Even though that's the best thing for performance, it doesn't really mean it's the best thing for foot health. I imagine at this point, you all know Vivo Barefoot. They make the best barefoot shoes out there. Having a wider toe box allows our toes to spread out like they're meant to. When I got my foot injury last year, walking around in normal shoes would put a ton of pressure on the knuckles of my foot, making it hurt a lot. But thanks to Vivo having flat shoes, the pressure would be balanced out, not only making it not hurt, but also improving my ankle flexibility, which is something we all know is very important in climbing. That's why I am really glad to announce that Vivo Barefoot is sponsoring this video. And not only that, we are giving away a pair of Primus Lite. one of their flagship models. So if you want to win yourself a pair of Vivo Barefoots, remember to be subscribed to the channel and following the Vivo Instagram. Also leave your Instagram handle down in the comment section with a funny comment so that I can contact you if you win. Thanks again, Vivo, for sponsoring this video. And now there's only one thing I want you to focus on, the strategy mental side of climbing, and that is route reading. Effectively, there's a thing we call climbing IQ, which is how smart you are in climbing terms, and not terms like crimps or slopers. But I want you to be able to look at a climb and over time, because this is gonna take time, imagine yourself climb the climb, visualize it before you actually get on the holds. This will seem very weird, but over my almost 10 years in climbing, this has become one of the key skills that allows me to send climbs in much less tries. And if you can imagine sending every single climb you do from now to the rest of your life in half the amount of tries, you will get twice the amount of results. So this is one of those things that will make or break your climbing on the long term. If you think about it, route reading is a superpower. You can get the experience of climbing a climb without having to use your physical body and exert yourself to do it. Now that we've covered the basics, it's time to climb a little bit more and experiment with different types of climbs. In your second and third month, I want you to try exploring different wall angles. Climbing is not only vertical and it's not only jugs. So by climbing on slabs, vertical walls, overhangs, you'll learn that there's different techniques and moves that feel better or worse. And you'll also see that it's not just holds getting smaller that make climbs harder. Start with easy problems on each angle and each hold type, and you'll start to see that patterns emerge. These types of patterns might be problems. For example, you're starting to notice that there's a lot of side pulls and you're barn dorning off the wall. There's a few basic techniques that will help you out throughout your whole climbing journey, but for now, I want you to watch this video right here I made in the past and watch the first 3 techniques. You don't need to watch all 6, just pay attention to the first 3. Focus on that. By using those 3 techniques, you'll start to see that climbing is suddenly somehow easier. It's more complex physically, but it's less demanding as long as you do the right technique for the right problem. This is a theme that's going to continue throughout your whole climbing, so get used to it. Now, we're going to add one thing to our warm-up, and that is going to be hip thrusts. We've been working on mobility a little bit, but a lot of people still have weak hips. That is because we sit on chairs every single day, like me right now. So learning how to engage our lower body and core is key. In these months, don't really worry about chasing grades or anything. You are still a beginner, even though you might not want to be called a beginner. You're still a beginner. Trust me, you're going to be a beginner for years, so no worries about that. The best way to improve is now focusing on volume and understanding the basics of movement. How these new 3 techniques affect your climbing and how improving your mobility is going to improve your climbing in general. You'll also see that now your hands and forearms are a little bit more used to climbing, so you can do more volume, which is great because now instead of maybe spending 1 hour climbing, you can spend 2. So now really focus on doing tons of easy climbs and get the reps in. But remember, it's not really important how many tops you get, it's how you get those tops. Sure, you might get a new grade or something, but it looked horrible and you moved horrible. And I know it sucks, I'm just trying to be honest with you. It's not gonna help you improve. The trick, if you really want to improve, is fix all these problems, plug all these holes from now, because then you can do and just explode up. Now, the previous month, we really focused on route reading. I want you to keep on doing that, but I want you to add that now you have to learn how to commit. You have to think of the strategy with the route reading you've been doing, and since you've been doing a lot more volume over these months, you understand it a little bit more. And now when you have a plan, you have to commit to that plan and move fast. The biggest mistake I see beginners do is that they take so long to think and move throughout the climb. But if you can prepare and do everything before, and when you get on the wall, you already know exactly what to do, you will spend less time on the wall, less energy, and that will give you more time climbing different things and learning those new skills. Month 4. Now you're not a complete beginner. Yeah, we did it. You know some techniques, you've gotten used to climbing, maybe you might be getting really hooked on it and have a ton of friends and been learning from them. That's when you'll start getting advice like, hey, you gotta start training your fingers or stuff like that. Now, starting to train too early in your climbing career can maybe injure you or lead you down the unholy path, just getting stronger and not learning technique. What I'd recommend is that you begin doing very light training for your fingers, like the routine I did in this video, but don't do the max hangs. That's gonna get you used to the hold a little bit more, which is good without any risk of injury. You can get something like a porta block, an unlevel edge, a normal fingerboard, and just spend a few reps per day just hanging on it very lightly, and your fingers will get stronger over time. More importantly, they'll be more resilient, which is one of the key things in climbing. This will lead to injury prevention. Making your fingers feel comfortable on moves and not tweaky is something invaluable for climbing. We're gonna keep on focusing on the techniques we've been doing in the past, and by incorporating this new finger training, you're gonna feel stronger on every single hold. And we're also gonna be including more things into our warm-up. I want you to think about the weaknesses that have been popping up over these 4 months. Maybe you've realized your hip mobility is improving, but your knees still feel stiff. Find some stretches, find some exercise that helps you out. This is where your climbing journey is gonna start differing a little bit from other people. You have to see what's limiting you and what techniques you're bad at and why you need to improve them and how. In your second and third month, you learn 3 of the 6 fundamental techniques. Now it's time for you to learn the other 3. And with this, you will know every single technique you need. You'll suddenly see that there were previous problems that you didn't have a way to solve, that now you can, and by applying these techniques and combining them, you essentially can solve every single problem in your climbing career. So congratulations. Months 5 and 6. Now that you've been climbing consistently, it's time to revisit and perfect the basics while pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Here is where we're gonna focus on getting to the intermediate stage. You're gonna start seeing that the techniques you've been practicing, there's a few that you're better at, a few that you're worse. You're gonna see that suddenly there's boulders that come up. You might feel that your pull-up strength is lacking, or you're still not used to rockovers. This is when we get to train all that. What you're going to do is include in your warm-up 15 minutes of your anti-style. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you're gonna do it. On the physical side, we're gonna focus on pull-ups. Finally, you're gonna try to aim to be able to do between 5 and 8 pull-ups. If you can do 10 or more, do not worry about this. If you can maintain that level, you are golden. And on the lower body, we're gonna focus on Goku type of squats where you drop there like side lunges and you go as deep as possible. This is gonna be great for heel hooks and also rockovers. Getting used to it is huge. If you can aim to do between 10 and 15, that would be great. This move is super important because our feet are never at the same height in climbing. So by learning how to be strong on one-legged moves, we can efficiently move our hips and take weight off our hands. Now, you've been climbing for over half a year. Congratulations. You are probably a beast because you've been focusing on the few really important things instead of on everything else. And now is the time for your climbing to go from beginner to a solid intermediate or even advanced climber at this point. You are gonna learn one of the hardest skills in climbing, projecting. This is where everything actually gets hard. From now on, you are probably going to fall more than you falled on the previous 6 months and get maybe half the sense, but that's okay because this is also important for growth. If you've been following the guide up until now, you've been working on mobility, you've been working a little bit on pull-ups, a little bit on squats, you know all the 6 techniques, you know how to root read, you've been imagining yourself all throughout these 6 months on how to climb. So now the trick is to find something hard and break it down and learn it. This, mentally, you will have to think of it like a dance routine. You have to learn all the moves and it's not gonna go down fast, but when you do go and climb it, it's gonna feel like a rehearsed choreography. And by the time you get to the top, this is gonna be one of the most satisfying moments of your life. For most people, the climbing obsession starts because you look at something you previously thought was completely impossible, and by the end of the experience, you either get really close to doing it and improve a lot, or you actually send it and you prove to yourself that you can do anything. Some important things in projecting is understanding, first of all, that it is actually hard. you are not going to send it fast. So learning to have that mental resilience and relaxing against this adversity is important. Also, breaking the climb down into different sections. Find any natural rest or any break in the climb where the style climbs, or find any break in the climb where the climb changes angle. If you see an overhang that then has a mantle and a slab, you can break that into two very distinct points and you work different styles on it. Also, learning to build small sequences and adding moves slowly on top of it is going to be key to climbing. If you always go from the bottom up, you are going to be spending a lot of energy for every single move. Once you start getting a few sequences, a few moves together, you're going to start also realizing, hey, if I move my heel hook a little bit more to the right, it's going to be better. There are small adjustments that make a huge difference. When you get those sequences, you start tying them together and you start adding one move at a time, and slowly you're going to be essentially sending your project in maybe two parts and just have to link them together. Then it's just a matter of being fresh and giving it a few very solid tries and just sending it. If you want to see a little bit of how I approach that, well, you have a ton of videos, but specifically I would recommend the Road to V10 series where, you can see me following and explaining my thought process on how I go for climbs. On months 8 and 9, you have to consolidate your grade. By now you've been projecting and you've likely broken into a new grade. You might also be considered advanced at your gym. It depends. Once you break into a new grade, you don't have to look at the next one. Sometimes you have to stop, readjust, get very comfortable at that grade to then build the base of a pyramid and go up again. At this point, you've become intermediate. So if you find anything that you do that looks like a beginner, let's say heel hooks or rock-ons, you want to eliminate that. By consolidating your grade, you don't only want to be good at what your style is, but you also want to be decent at everything else. If there's anything that pokes out, like an anti-style, let's say slab for example, it's really good to spend some time working on that and then push your new max again. At this point, you also might be interested in doing a little bit more finger training. Since you've been doing lightly for quite a few months now, your fingers are probably pretty used to it. So I would recommend watching the same video as before, but using that same max hang protocol. And combined with that, I've gotten some pretty good gains and I think it'll work out for you too. Now, for these last few months of your first year in climbing, I want you to really look back at your climbing and analyze what you think is your climbing identity. What your style is, what you like, what you hate, what you're good at, what you're bad at. Make a list, and what you have to focus is for next year. And then write down what you would like to be in 5 years. Don't say next year because you'll feel pressure about it, but let's say 5 years. What you think you can get in those 5 years. And I'm not talking about just grade-wise. Look at techniques or movements you would like to be able to do efficiently. Like let's say you want to be able to do the splits or a pancake stretch or a one-arm pull-up. Just think about everything and make that list, and then that is going to give you the keys to your plan for the future. I want to give you some general advice and things to watch out for, because in these 3 months of climbing, you'll start to see that you've gotten pretty good and there's a ton of stuff that you can do. But because you've gotten better, there's a ton of pitfalls you can fall into. So these are 10 things I would watch out for. Progress isn't linear. You've probably seen it already, but this is the fastest you're probably going to move in climbing. The easier grades are easier for a reason, and the harder it gets, there's a bigger gap in between grades. So understanding that it's not always about sending the maximum grade is very important. Otherwise, you're going to live in a world of depression instead of in a fun one where climbing is a good thing. Don't compare yourself to others. Everyone has their own pace, but everyone has their own pace, their own talents, their own strong points and weaknesses, and understanding that you focusing on your climbing and only looking at others for inspiration is the best way to move forward. Recovery is essential. Climbing is super demanding on the body. It's probably one of the most complete sports in the whole world, and if you don't take care of your body, you are not going to keep up. Prioritize sleep, hydration, nutrition. They're even more important than your training. Take care of your skin. Our skin is the contact we have with the wall. So if it's opening up or you have dry skin, it'll limit how hard you can climb. Learn to sand down calluses so that they don't tear up. Get some cream if you need it. Find the ways that work for your skin type. Avoid overtraining. This is one of the most common things I see out there, and I changed that in my climbing like 4 years ago, and I think it was huge. I used to always go for broke and come back home where I couldn't open my hands anymore, and that just takes too long to recover from. If you climb like 3 or 4 times a week, you really can't get all of that back. So it's better to leave maybe 1 rep in the tank, and if you're always focusing more on technique than strength, you'll still get better constantly. So yeah, don't overtrain. One of the most important ones is technique over strength. I always say you cannot get stronger in 1 session, but you can climb better in 1 session. Learning to rely more on technique than strength is always going to be something good, and you can always get stronger. It's not a bad thing. The problem is, once you have that strength, it's really hard to turn it off. So it's really hard to learn good technique after you're strong. Watch out for bad habits in climbing. Over gripping, skipping warm-ups, rushing to hard moves, they're all things that can move you further away from your objectives than you think. Don't just climb for the sake of climbing. Take the time, route read, visualize. These are all things that feel small on day 1, but if you've been doing it all the way up until here, you'll see that you can solve problems that no one else can. I swear, trust me, these are the things, the intangibles that the average climber doesn't do, and that's why they stay average. Keep it fun. Don't get too stuck in the grades. In my case, whenever there's too much pressure, I drop the ball. That's why if you can keep it fun, climb with cool people, have friends, go on trips, it will always make climbing a big part of your life and a good one. Number 9, save this video somewhere for the future, because even though this guide says the first year in your climbing, you could come back in 3 years and notice there's things that you still haven't improved on. To be honest, this is basically a list of stuff I wish I would have done, and there's some things I still have to improve on this. If you ever feel stuck, come back, look at this guide, and see if there's anything in here that can help you. Number 10. As you've seen throughout this video, I've mentioned a ton of other resources and videos I've made on the channel. All of these videos can help you improve your climbing. But one of the best ways to improve climbing is climbing with other strong and good partners. So if you have a friend that's starting out, or maybe they've already been climbing for 3 years, but you think this guide would be useful, send it to them so they can get rid of anything that's holding them back. And that way, you can both unlock your true climbing potential.